Yes.
Okay.
Professor Saritas, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Ferenc, and many thanks, colleagues who are organizing this event in Budapest. And particular thanks to Dr. Oğuz Demir, who invited me to take a part at this event of this very respectable project. So I'm very glad to be with you here today. Without taking too long, probably I'll just start my presentation. So I'll see how I can share my screen. So, well, today, you know, we are going through some very extraordinary times in many ways. So we understand that thinking about the future has become much more critical and much more important. Actually, I think this was also a time, or this has been also a time where we can explain people in the quickest way what uncertainty is, why we cannot predict the future, why there are different scenarios about the future, and so many futures concepts which we couldn't normally explain to the public to many hours can be explained during this time in a very fast way, because people really experience in their lives. They are facing great uncertainty. They don't know about tomorrow. So they understand that it is very crucial to think about the future. So considering that we have a mixed group of audience in here, I think it would be a good idea to give a little bit of a background on what we are talking about. So the presentation will be about designing the future in the time of pandemic. So I will touch nouns, unknowns, and wildcards which exist during this time. Before doing that, I'll just give a little background on foresight. So first of all, why are we concerned about the future? We see that actually simply because it is too costly not to do so. So we are going through some times where social life is stopped, economic life is stopped, and it has so many different destructive consequences on our society. If there was a foresight, if there was future thinking, probably we could avoid a number of negative developments we have experienced during this process. So we have been imprisoned in our homes and places with very limited activity. And so many people are also still on the street because they are thinking that they have to continue their lives, because if they don't work, they will die. So if they don't die from the virus itself, they will die from hunger. So they have a very tough choice to make. So it is very costly not to think about the future. Thinking about the future helps us in many ways. It enables innovation, helps us setting priorities for the future. We optimize our use of resources. We think in innovative ways and different ways. We learn from experience, and we also have an opportunity to design common futures together. And we look into the future to detect some wildcards and weak signals, which have some indications from today and which require some action. Remember that foresight is not only thinking about the future and living the future there. Foresight is also acting, so connecting the future with the present and planning your actions in the long, medium, and short terms, and formulate necessary policies and strategies for action from the present day. Foresight is not a new concept. It has been there. It's a part of human characteristic. So it is actually inside of all of us. So we always think about the consequences of our actions, the future consequences. And then we started seeing that our individual foresight capacity has been brought together in order to form institutional foresight activities. A number of foresight studies have been undertaken for the purpose of using technology for defense, for economic purposes, for example, during the 1970s, to building up innovation systems, national, regional innovation systems, and then later times to use science and technology for all sorts of social, economic, and environmental purposes. More recently, we saw that actually foresight has been very much characterized by increasing frequency of wildcard shocks and surprises. So these are now becoming new normals of our lives. And the evolution continues. We see that there's a rapid scientific and technological development and emerging of data, use of machines, artificial intelligence, and all other technologies. Besides giving, having all these threats, these are giving us all sorts of opportunities to deal with them in the longer run. But as I said, it's not only enough to think about the future, it's also important to act based on our future's thinking. At the moment, we have the number of drivers of change shaping the future. So we are experiencing a growing up global demand for products and services. As the demand grows up, things get scarce. So increasing demand for water, food, energy, and natural resources. And at the same time, they gain value. They become more expensive as they are finite and they have to be shared. So these are all giving rise to some concerns about sustainability, security, with potential social, economic, and political conflicts in the world. So an answer to this challenge is going innovative. So advancements in science, technology, innovation, increasing public and private R&D, growing social awareness of these grand challenges, and availability of data and analytics methods will help us to overcome these challenges. We are constrained, as I said. Now, it is actually a very dramatic picture. So we are dealing with the immediate issue of pandemic right now, but we expect that there's a bigger picture behind it. And the pandemic only has triggered the development, the future development of, for example, some problems related to water demand, for example, which will increase 55% in the next 2-3 decades to come. We will need 60% more food. We will need 37% more energy. So where to get all this from? While we are treating our planet not in the best manner. So 52% of our agricultural land is affected by moderate and severe degradation. But at the same time, we have a number of opportunities, as I said, to address these issues. There are a number of technologies and there are a number of developments. So we have new information sources that we can monitor our resources. We can look down to our planet and collect a number of data about it. We can look up on the sky and also explore potential resources outside the planet. We've seen very exciting developments in the past few days with the private space launches. We are more and more interconnected. So there are 5G technologies, but we are moving into the technologies which will enable wiring brains and their computational powers. And we are going into some new ecosystem of integrated devices. Not only devices, we are moving from actually the Internet of Things into Internet of Everything with human in the loop systems, converging human and machine intelligence together, which will open some new opportunities for us. And during this time, the nature of innovation is also changing. So we are actually making the future a reality so that people can experience what is going to happen in the future through some artificial reality, virtual reality, and other technologies. You can touch, you can feel, and you can smell what's going to happen. Our infrastructure is also developing. So we are using some new technologies for governance, for decision-making, and we are talking about smart cities, renewable energies, autonomous vehicles. So our infrastructure is also improving during this time. And industry. We see that we are talking about an industrial revolution, although this topic seems to be on the side at the moment, but it is actually going to come back and very strong. So all the production technologies, industrial robotics, additive manufacturing, and then also robots in our lives, and other technologies which enable us interacting with each other through social media, and then sharing economy, sharing of our limited resources, and then using technologies like blockchain to make sure that we can have more equal, more democratic, and more secure access to resources, and then make decisions according to that. The reason I put all these technologies in one picture is that in normal times, we talk about one or two of these technologies, but we should know that the future will be actually shaped by a combination of them. So there will be a number of developments. There will be a number of exciting and interesting technologies, scientific revolutions, and at the same time, new and emerging challenges. So the future will certainly be different by considering this ecosystem of new challenges and technologies emerging. So all these actually tell us that we need foresight for our decision making. So foresight has been there for several decades already. It has been integrated in many countries in policy and strategy making processes, in governments, in corporations, in other organizations, international organizations, for example. And certainly we will continue doing foresight, especially thinking that we are experiencing some uncertain times. This is because the future is not only a continuum of the past and past dynamics, but can be shaped by our choices and actions. And therefore, we cannot predict the future because there's a human element in the system, and humans and societies don't always behave in the most rational way. That's why we are talking about uncertainty. There's not one possible future only. We are talking about multiple futures, uncertainty. And this is actually not a bad thing in foresight terms. Uncertainty in foresight terms is an advantage for us because it gives us a possibility space to design new futures. It's an empty sheet that we can write, that we can visualize a desirable future vision. So by considering this, we can say that foresight and future scenarios involve both rational analysis and at the same time subjective judgment, which is based on evidence, the best evidence and expertise available, creativity, participation, to explore trends, drivers of change, weak signals, and those wildcards. So following this background, let's come to our present time and what's happening around us. I will start with a small quiz, which will be wildcard quiz. So the question is, which hit may have a greater impact on the planet? An asteroid, size of the Empire State Building. If you are following the news these days, there are some asteroids passing nearby. So this may certainly give a great impact. We always talk about actually some asteroid hits when we try to give some examples of wildcards. And we see that this is not very unlikely. So this is very likely. So if you look at the NASA and other kind of organizations engaged in space research, you will see that they are nowadays, as of today, yesterday, and maybe tomorrow too, talking about some of these asteroids. So is an asteroid a cause of a great impact on the planet, or a virus, which is a microscopic kind of sized entity, and it may also, if it hits, it may also have a great impact on the planet. Or the great hit will come from some policymakers with particular hairstyles. So which hit may have a greater impact on the planet? The biggest hit on the planet may come from ignorance. So I will talk about the ignorance now, which is actually showing that it is not only about the lack of foresight, but even if we had foresight, we had ignored to take actions on this topic. So we can talk about several types of ignorance under several types of uncertainties. So in the world, we are talking about now events which can be known or unknown. But at the same time, there are some events which are known knowns. These are the events that we know already. And there are also events which are known unknowns, which we know that we don't know. And there are events which are unknown known, so we don't know, or we ignore that we know them. There are also events which are unknown, that we don't know what we don't know. So this is a picture, a framework built on Johari window, psychology researchers by Luft and Ingham. They have suggested this framework, but it became more popular when Donald Rumsfeld used this in 2002 about the lack of evidence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And later we used this framework to explain 3 types of ignorance, which would be ignorance due to unexpected causal relationships of emerging situations, unknown, because we don't know actually, but situations emerge, and then with a systemic and causal relationship, they may cause some other unexpected consequences. Ignorance of known risks that we are aware of. So we know that there are some risks, but we ignore them. These are known unknowns. And ignorance due to pretending not to know about. So we are pretending that we don't know about some of the events, which are unknown now. So if we come to the COVID issue, we see that actually ignorance is the biggest enemy of foresight, because COVID-19 exemplifies 3 levels of ignorance. In terms of likelihood and timing of the event, which is a known unknown. We knew that there were pandemics, but we didn't know about the likelihood and timing of the event. In terms of the magnitude of the pandemic, which is an unknown known, we knew that if pandemic is a pandemic, then it will have a great geographical coverage in the world. And we kept ignoring this basically, and it became unknown now. And there are also unknown unknowns, which are broader systemic impacts of the pandemic on society, economy, and technology, which we also experience right now. So because of this, some bigger waves will follow. Likelihood and timing of pandemics. Why this was known unknown? So this was not the first pandemic. So if you look at the past 100 years, so we see that there were a lot of different flus and pandemics going around the world, starting with the famous Spanish flu and followed by the others. And today we are talking about novel coronavirus COVID-19, which has claimed many lives around the world, and many people are infected, just over 6 million as of today. So we knew this. And there was a very nice report by the World Health Organization. The report was published in 2018, so new. And this was the time when we didn't talk about COVID-19. And please go and have a look at this report and see how all the things we have been talking about since the beginning of pandemic was already considered. And why, if we considered all these events and all these things, we didn't take any actions. Where was our foresight? If you look at this, the contents of this report, for example, you see that there are some interesting items. So this is the part of the table of contents. You see that there are a number of issues that we are talking about today, right? And then infectious diseases, and then there were some tips and checklists for responses and how to coordinate these responses, how to access to health information, how to communicate this risk with the others. And if you go down, you can see 21st century aspects of change and complicate risk communication, and how to make actually sure that we can protect. If you go to the bottom of the picture, you see that there were some ideas on protecting frontline respondents. So you know how many doctors, nurses, and medical personnel we lost during this time, and how we can confront the human resource crisis. So this is actually all there. And this report was just written a year before COVID-19 became evident in our lives. And there were a lot of unknown nouns. So we knew that actually pandemics might be caused by a number of factors, like social, technological, economic, environmental, political, values and cultures. A number of factors actually would make an epidemic a pandemic, a global pandemic. We were aware that we were having an aging population. We are living in urban areas where massive amounts of people come together, and our health services, we knew that they were not perfect yet. In many countries, it just became evident. And we also know that there are a number of technologies, again, which can help us to develop some responses, but why didn't we use them, or why didn't we put them in place so that they can be ready in the event, in the likelihood of such an event? And we also know that we are living in a global economic system. We have international value chains and the national economic systems, industrialization, all based on the concept of globalization, of interconnected production, interconnected economic relations and political relations. We are also aware that there are also challenges related to climate change, food and water availability, international relations, multipolar world, nation states, new governance systems. So these are all there. And international tourism. We knew how many people were traveling around the world at any point of time. Hundreds of thousands of flights are on the air in 24 hours time. And if such a pandemic starts, then how quickly it could be spread around the world. So we knew about the pandemic of the magnitude of the pandemic, but we pretending like it doesn't exist. And some unexpected consequences. We know that there are so many systems. Our systems are cascaded and systemically related. We realized quickly that the issue of pandemic is not a health issue only. It's an economic issue. It's a political issue. It has environmental aspects and political consequences. So here is the thought-provoking slide that the Iraqi government launches invasion to bring democracy to America. So we know that actually there are big social disturbances now in the country. So maybe some other countries will attempt to bring democracy to the country, democracy back home. So there are a lot of unexpected consequences. Of course, joke aside, we need to consider the systemic relationships between all these different systems in our lives. As I said, social systems, economic systems, technological systems, environmental, political systems, our cultures, these are all interrelated and interlinked. So we need to use our foresight. We need to get ready for nouns and unknowns. First of all, we definitely need to analyze emerging trends and challenges. We need to develop alternative futures and scenarios, and then develop some indicators to monitor the evolution of events and then to understand the direction of developments and think about their future impacts. We need to develop some visions and priorities for the desirable future in order to get to, again, to the future that we want to, while avoiding the negative consequences of other scenarios. And we need to develop some strategies and roadmaps for long, medium, and short terms. And we need to act, and we need to implement our decision. So this was the main component lacking in our foresight and in our policy-making activities. And we also monitor, evaluate, and update our foresight studies. So we need to do this through participation and engagement. We definitely, this is the time, we definitely need stakeholder dialogue, mutual learning, and collective visioning. And then we need to make sure that this becomes a decision-making culture and strategy-making culture in our society, because we cannot leave decision-making and strategy-making only in the hands of a few people. So we need to make sure that they are using evidence, using science and technology, and then monitoring again the developments and trends in the world, and making much more informed decisions by engaging necessary stakeholders in the process. Because this is only the first way. So everybody thinks that they'll be happy when the pandemic is over, but there are some other issues to expect in the future. There's an economic crisis agenda, which is getting very hot and hot every day. There's an agenda in terms of global and national security. There's an agenda in terms of international migration, natural disasters, earthquake, urbanization, climate change, energy, food, and water. So while looking at a small wave, we should make sure that we don't miss the big wave. Thank you very much.